Hi, I'm Ranger Tyler. Today we're here at Hartwood Acres Park. If you look around our forest in the wintertime, they can seem pretty plain and bare, but if we know what to look for, there's actually a ton of diversity here. So we have over 100 tree species in PA, and they all have unique characteristics that can help distinguish them. So I'm standing here next to a beech tree. We can identify this tree by its incredibly smooth bark all the way from the top to bottom. There are no seams or cracks in this tree anywhere except for maybe where an animal might have damaged the bark. We can see that this tree here is still holding on to some of its dead leaves, and that's known as Marcescens. So this is a feature that's common on beeches, hornbeams, and oaks. So behind me here we have an incredibly large beech tree, and we can see that even at its massive size, the bark still remains smooth. There's a lot of trees that, when they're really small, have smooth bark, but as they grow older, it cracks and makes ridges and furrows or scales, but this still remains quite smooth. All right, so I'm holding a branch of a witch hazel here, which is a small shrub-like tree. What's really unique about this tree is that it still holds on to parts of its flowers in the wintertime. So it blooms in the fall, and some of its petals fall off, but we can still see some remnants of the flowers here on the branches. So here we have a white oak tree, and we can still see some of the marcescent leaves up on its branches. But we can identify this by some of its bark. So in this section here, we have these long scaly plates that are somewhat overlapping and gives it somewhat of a shaggy appearance. But lower down on the tree, we can usually find some more blocky type bark with a few horizontal breaks. And we can also identify it by smooth patch disease. So smooth patch disease is caused by a fungus that affects a lot of hardwoods, but almost always affects white oak specifically. And so we can see some right up here. It just causes the bark to fall off the tree. It doesn't harm it in any way other than maybe losing some of its defenses. Here we have a sassafras tree. We can identify this by its ridged and furrowed bark. So the ridges are where the bark protrudes from the tree, and the furrows are in between. And a lot of times the ridges and furrows on the sassafras make sort of X shapes or Y shapes. But we can also identify it by its smell. So I found here a twig that had fallen off the tree, and if you break that twig and smell it, it often smells like root beer. But if you find a twig that doesn't smell, there's some other characteristics that we can take a look at to help identify them. So here we have a hickory twig. So the hickory twig, if we compare it to some other twigs, are a lot thicker than others. And we can see, if we get really close, we can look at the scars the leaves left as they fell. So if we take a look at this twig here from a red maple, we can see it has a reddish color, but what's really important are the opposite arrangements of the buds. So only a few species have opposite buds. So we can see here they're coming off at the same place each time. So one way we can remember which species have this opposite arrangement is with mad honey horse. So mad stands for maple ash dogwood, honey for honeysuckle, and horse for horse chestnut. Most other trees out there have alternating patterns. So we have right and left that alternates. So here we have the twig of a beech tree, and we can see it has that alternate arrangement, and it has these really tall, pointy buds. We can compare that to a hickory twig, which has a large bud at the end, but rather small ones going up and down the twig. We can also take a look at the really large leaf scars here on the hickory. So they make a heart-shaped, or some people say it looks like a monkey or even sloth face. And the leaf scars are where the leaves have fallen off the twigs from previous years. So I'm standing here surrounded by a bunch of different evergreens. Most of the time when I think of an evergreen, I think of a pine tree with its needles and cones. And most of our evergreens do happen to be conifers, like the pine tree. However, we have a separate video linked down below that goes into details on identifying conifers. But here we have a broad-leafed evergreen. So this is a holly tree, an American holly tree, and we can identify it by its broad green leaves that are quite spiky to the touch. So these spiky leaves here stay green all year long, and sometimes on the female holly trees you can see little red berries, but they're often eaten by wildlife before you get a chance to see them. Thank you for joining us for Winter Tree ID. Next time you're in our parks, take a close look at the trees around you to explore the beauty of the diversity that our Allegheny County parks offer.